All right, let's get started. Well, hey, welcome to the CISO Sandbox Phish Bowl Fantasy Football Thought Leadership Series. Today, we are thrilled to have Dan Lohrmann join us. Good to have you here, Dan.
It's great to be with you, Elliot. It's a lot of fun, and I look forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. So let's first of all talk a little bit about the Phish Bowl. So the Phish Bowl, to remind everybody, this is as far as I know, the world's first fantasy football league for CISOs, in order to talk about cybersecurity through the vehicle of fantasy football. So, Dan, why don't you tell me a little bit, because you're honestly one of the primary inspirations for the reason why I started this whole crazy idea. You've been doing this since before really anybody. So tell us a little bit about like your background with football and writing about football and cybersecurity and how it all comes together here for you.
Yeah, thanks. Well, just a real quick background. I worked at NSA in the late 80s. I was in England with Lockheed and Mantech in the 90s. 17 years in Michigan government. So a lot of different roles in Michigan government. CISO, CISO, CTO, agency CIO, a lot of different things. But going even back before that, I played college quarterback at Valparaiso, didn't get a great career. We didn't win a lot of games. It was Division II football, and I love football. I actually played 2 years, and I kind of was a scout and coach my junior and senior years in college. So I grew up loving football. Way back to the Colts, when the Colts left and went to Indianapolis, and I was crushed. They left at midnight, and then my brothers are all in Baltimore now. I'm still kind of a Ravens fan, but I love college football, and I follow Michigan State, and kind of watch college football probably more than I watch pro football, but I watch pro quite a bit. Lot of interest, and I find as we discussed earlier, Elliot, so many similarities. And so many real honest, comparisons between football and cybersecurity. And obviously the obvious one being offense and defense, attack, defend. But there's so many more than that. We're going to get into some of that, but so many different aspects to this and how you strategize. You do this and they do that, and you have to adjust. And you think you're good, and then you're not good, and then boom, it hits, and all of a sudden, things go south pretty fast sometimes. So it's certainly a topic that I've been able to talk about, from people's careers perspective. Done a lot of blogging for Government Technology Magazine, CSO Magazine, around football and cybersecurity. I think if you even Google football and cybersecurity, some of those blogs will pop up.
I have Googled and read your blogs on the topic. I love them. They're really great. They were the inspiration really for this idea for me, that there were other people out there who really saw the connection between team sports. In general, football can be specifically a really great way to get into cybersecurity analogies, but in general, team sports and cybersecurity and all points between. And in addition to reading your articles, I, of course, have read your book, and I recommend everybody to read this book. It's a fantastic book, and we're going to be bringing in the tie-in between the Phish Bowl Fantasy Football League and this book, and we will sort of discuss our way towards that endpoint here. But to begin with, Dan, so you did a great job on your draft. You drafted a great team. You have some real stars. You did. You got you got Patrick Mahomes at a great value, Najee Harris, Mark Andrews, the great tight end. You got this great team together, but if I'm not mistaken, you have not been playing a whole lot of fantasy football lately. And before I say anything more, I should just remind everybody, so fantasy football is you draft with a group of friends a bunch of real life football players, and you do this on a platform. We happen to be using ESPN. The platform keeps track of all of their statistics every single week and transforms those statistics into points. Every week you're facing someone else. You try to score more points than that person. At the end of the league, at the end of the year, the league will award you some kind of a prize. For us from Hawks Hunt, we are offering a deep sea fishing trip. So we're playing for that. But so that's just the background. So, but again, so you've not been doing a lot of this lately. So tell me a little bit about how you approach this.
Yeah, no. And Elliot, all kudos to you for setting this up. I think it's fantastic and how much thought has gone into this. And Yeah, I mean, I have played fantasy football way back when, as I think we mentioned earlier before the session, but not in this platform. Certainly not been doing it for the last 10 years or so. So it's been a while. I mean, clearly I looked at statistics. I looked at the data. You know, there's a zillion different sources out there you can look at. So I went out and you know, and obviously looked at the top quarterbacks, the top receivers, you know, points, how that works. Obviously, for those who don't do this like me, I'm kind of a rookie in this league. I guess in some ways we're all rookies, and maybe not rookies at doing fantasy football, but for this league. But trying to figure out what the right combinations are, right, what the right backups are based on, you know, previous you know, basically performance, you know, what they've done in previous years and what projections were. There's a zillion different blogs and articles out there on how to do it best. I did look at I drafted live. I didn't let the computer do all of it for me, but I did obviously look as we were going through it on Labor Day, and I looked at, you know, what the computer recommended that I do. And then I sometimes did that and sometimes I didn't. You know, I looked at stats and data and was able to make some, some picks and some backups. You know, it's not an exact science, as we were talking about earlier. I got really toasted week one. I did pretty well, about 123 points, but my competitor had 147, so I got smoked. And then this week I'm in the league going into Monday night, but we'll see what happens tonight. I've debated, do I want to go with Patrick Mahomes or Kirk Cousins? Because I kind of think Kirk Cousins had a great game first week against Green Bay, and now he's up against Philly, and Philly got smoked by Detroit pass-wise. So maybe Kirk Cousins is going to outperform Patrick Mahomes. We'll see. My gut kind of told me to go with Kirk Cousins. And I didn't. I went with Patrick Mahomes. He did okay. I got like 17 points yesterday, I think, 17.5 or something. My gut tells me Kurt's going to do better than that tonight, but we'll find out.
The old gut versus the data question. Well, that right there is a great question to ask you as a CISO with so much experience in cybersecurity leadership. So have you ever been put in a position where you have all of this data, all of these reports brought to you that say you should do something in a certain way, but your gut's just telling you, I don't know, man, I should probably do it this other way? Is that something that you ever have, or are you always going where the data tells you to go as a CISO?
I absolutely have lots of stories where that's happened. I mean, especially it happens with people, because, you know, relationships is always about people, process, and technology. And it's, you know, even with, sports, it's the same. You know, you need the data, the stats, you know, I guess the coaches know, do you go for it on fourth down or not? You know, what are the percentage likelihoods based on where you're out of the field or whatever. But, as a CISO, I remember many times in the state of Michigan, you'd have different opinions. You'd want to get different inputs from HR, legal, or if somebody does something stupid on an insider threat. You know, what level of, action do you want to take or not take based upon what somebody did? Do you, both from an HR perspective, do you make a decision about, it could be hiring somebody, firing somebody, it could be discipline, but also around, where you're going to have the biggest holes on your enterprise. So you look at an assessment of your security. Even today, people look at, okay, trying to build a zero trust architecture, trying to do, and they look at things like multi-factor authentication. They look at things like, are we patching? And you try to decide, okay, where am I going to, which product are we going to buy? Obviously, you got to, many times there's an RFP, request for proposal. You have a formal process. Look at the price, look at the product, and you make a decision. Sometimes it's like a whole decision. Do we go with multi-factor authentication, or do we buy a tool set that's going to help us, do better patching, or where are the biggest holes based on metrics, based on audit findings, based on things you have to do, but also sometimes it's not a clear-cut call. I mean, if you got a big hole in your organization, you've got to get things done. But we all have competing priorities. We all have only so many hours in a day. Clearly we want to say we want to do everything, but we can't do everything well. And so, clearly we have to be doing awareness. Clearly we have to be communicating well, but we look at tool sets, we look at relationships. Each and every day, we're all making those decisions. We're hopefully looking at the data, hoping getting that intelligence. And then ultimately, just like a coach is going to decide who they're going to put in for which plays and what formations, or what are they going to do differently, because things aren't working, or maybe things are working and they want to change it up. Whatever it is, we're all making those decisions each and every day.
Dan, that answer right there is the reason why the Phish Bowl was started. That perfectly captured the whole idea of this kind of relationship between sports, team sports, and cybersecurity from the leader's perspective, especially. At the end of that answer there, you brought up a great point about data and intelligence. And that brings us to the central topic of today's talk. And I wanted to bring this up with you because when I first read your book, Cyber Mayday and the Day After, A Leader's Guide to Preparing, Managing, and Recovering from Inevitable Business Disruptions, what struck me was that it's very well researched. It's very well referenced. The sources here are themselves very powerful. You can go into the sources within the book and get a lot out of them. And this is a very trustable, that's not a real word, but this book itself, you can really trust the book because it's built on trusted sources. So getting back to that, and we're switching gears from, fantasy, what's really going to happen if you don't get a great source to fix your fantasy team. But the idea is, how do you find, with so much information out there and so much noise, how do you find the signal from the noise in cybersecurity when it's coming at you? And let's start with, just as a CISO, how do you find the signal from the noise and the good information that's out there?
And first of all, thanks, Elliot, for the kind words. I appreciate, the plug for the book. And Shemaine Tan and I are co-authors, and both of us really wanted to get a global perspective, and we wanted to get a global view of real stories from real situations, real ransomware attacks around the world, what really happened. And so I think, it starts with, we all hopefully know, like, trusted sources at a high level, like CISA, Department of Homeland Security. We use different, government agencies that have data, NIST, et cetera, NIST 800, the cybersecurity framework, lots of general kind of understanding things that people have, academic universities. So at a high level, I'd say this isn't kind of day to day, but at a high level, we all need to have a general understanding of the industry, how things change, what the different, who the major players are. Clearly, who the major vendors are. And, just like we do in fantasy football, right? Who the established, the best quarterbacks, Josh Allen's the best quarterback, Mahomes is second. You got the rankings from last year. That doesn't mean there's not going to be some rookie who's going to come in and beat them all out this year, right? And so the same thing happens in cybersecurity. So you got to have your general knowledge kind of going into the season, same way we did with football. But then you got to think, okay, well, what are the emerging threats? And there are a lot of different sources out there. Ponemon Institute has got some great studies. IBM does a big, cost of data breach. Verizon does a big breach study. There's a wide variety of different excellent sources around, what's really happening in the industry. Who are the trusted vendors? Who are the vendors that are established that you're going to look to? I'm not going to start naming names, but, all the different top, you typically know who they are. They're the biggest vendors out there in the cyber industry, and whether it be the Microsofts, the Googles, the Amazon Web Services, the different, cloud providers. But then down in the cybersecurity space, we start going through a list of names, CrowdStrike, Netscope, go through the list. There's so many different vendors, and so you do your research, but the threats are kind of evolving, and there's always some new, startup, if you will, just like those new rookies that come into the league and some new threat. So I think a lot of it is doing your homework, looking at reliable sources that can help you. I mean, there's the Gartners and the Forresters out there. Again, all these are kind of trusted names that are out there. But I'll tell you, as a CISO, there's nothing better. Give you two more real quick. I would just mention, through the years, picking up the phone and talking to other CISOs, having good relationships, really having somebody and trust in your industry. We're all in our careers, hopefully have, those partnerships, public and private sector that we can go to people we can talk to. And, how did you deal with this problem? Pick up the phone and talk to them. And hopefully you already have some of those, developing those networks that you can talk to people. The other thing I would just add is the ISACs, Information Sharing Analysis Centers, and they're really, really helpful. And they have them sector specific. So the multi-state ISAC for state and local governments, for example, but you've got transportation ISAC, and you've got, energy ISAC and financial services ISAC. So if you're a bank, if you're an insurance company, they trust the FS ISAC. They've got data on the attacks that are coming in. Where are they coming from? What are the sources? What are the mitigation factors you should be doing? And they can do this real time. And, people pay for these services. And a lot of them, they just, they have real time 724, 365 coverage. And then on some cases, it's really, but I think the biggest benefit of those, and people in those industries would tell you, is going to those conferences and just, networking and talking to your peers and others in the industry, and learning from them. And so I think we all need to be learning and gathering data. We do this each and every day in our jobs. From our management to our staff, up, it's kind of a 360-degree thing. But it's also from our customers and clients. What are they seeing in the business? What are their business goals? How are they different for 2023 than they were in 2022? And learning and listening to them. So we should be gathering data, not just around cybersecurity as leaders, but also from the business areas.
Well, I'll tell you. Yeah, thanks for that. And when you talk about taking information or sharing information and getting information from other CISOs, I know that's been for me really one of the most important sources is especially like your LinkedIn account. That's where I look at it every day. I get an idea like what headlines are actually important, because there's so many breaches and there's so many announcements, so many regulatory changes or talks about changes, and it really is a lot. I'm not an expert, and so I depend on experts to kind of at least present to me what information is important. And I wonder if there's an element of that when you're talking to the business, when you're talking to the business leaders. How do you figure out what to present to them in a way that they trust you, that you're presenting them something important that they need to know, and that they can trust the source that you're presenting, that it's something that is not going to be some hokey or something that's not really credible? So I guess the two-part question, how do you give them the right sources?
Sure. No, that's a great question. I think, there's no easy answer to trust. Everyone says, lots of great books on this, lots of great books on leadership, whether you're in cybersecurity or almost any career field. What does it mean to be a leader? What does it mean to build trust? And the great book from Covey, The Power of Trust, or something like that. Maybe it's not The Power of Trust, but the Speed of Trust. It's a great book. There's a lot of different answers to this, but I would just say it takes time. Trust and business relationships. I tell people, start off by doing lunch, and building a relationship. Just like, I've been married to my wife for 33 years. That you have different levels of trust, right? And it takes time. Certain trust within your family. We have trust within our friendships. We have trust around companies. And you're going to, even when you buy a product, when a CISO buys a product or a service, obviously it takes time and energy just to win that customer, to win that person over. Because they got the purchase order. Now we have the product. But even then, that's not where it ends. Are you still going to be using that product in 3 years, in 5 years? It takes good communication. It takes good really listening and establishing that trust over time. I think, how do you do the sources? I think ultimately, when I meet with business areas, they're trusting that I'm coming in with the cybersecurity knowledge. There's a lot of ways we get that. People get that initially early in your career. It's, I have a degree, I've got certifications, I've got credentials. A lot of it is really, though, based on experience. There's an old saying, who's the expert? The guy from out of town. He must be good. He's coming in from Seattle. But in Seattle, they're saying he must be good. He's coming in from Detroit, right? So, I mean, you get, there's always these different people who say different things around how do you build that up. And, reputations, somebody recently said, I heard a really good talk, reputations can take, decades to build and take 5 minutes to destroy. And so, we're all kind of on the hook each and every day, and our reputation is on the line, as individuals, as companies, as teams, as products, as services that we provide. So I just say, building relationships with business is a lot like building relationships in other parts of our lives. And don't just go with your agenda and say, let's talk. And it's fine to go in and scare them and throw all kinds of statistics at them. And here's the number of ransomware attacks and data breaches. But they also want to talk to you about the business. What are the challenges? Ask them questions. Make it a two-way discussion. Make sure that you listen to what their goals are, what the business goals are. And just end with this, Elliot, on that one point. I often say, I say this in a number of my blogs, that if the business fails, there is no cybersecurity. So at the end of the day, you've got to be an enabler. I mean, if the business goes bankrupt, and you're the CISO of that business, you're out of a job, right? Like everybody else, business is bankrupt. So, we need to be enablers of the business. We need to be bringing our knowledge and our background, our expertise to the team. And the team is not just technology team. It's also all the different C-suite components. It's the legal, it's financial, it's all of that. And just like there's a team in football, maybe you're the quarterback of the cybersecurity in your organization, but you need all of those players to be involved.
Yeah. Way to bring it back to the football analogy there, because that was a really important answer, and the idea about trust and relationships. And not exactly switching gears, but you're also a person who has always impressed me as someone who really takes awareness seriously too.
Yeah.
And it seems like that you're building a trust relationship with your CEO, your board, your CTO, your CIO. Is there a similar trust relationship that you're also building with the employee base? And you could call them kind of the way that the organizations of a football franchise might be trying to develop a relationship with their fans in different ways, getting everybody kind of on board and to fill the stadium and to, support the team. Is there something about cybersecurity that you would say is kind of similar to that, trying to get that information across, communicate the value of cybersecurity, not just to the leadership, but horizontally to other people? And how do you do that?
Absolutely agree. It needs to be engaging. It needs to be interactive. You need to be teaching people things they don't already know. I think what so many people do wrong with awareness training is they keep going over the same thing year after year after year. It's the same thing I've heard 5 years in a row, but they're not using the same iPhone they were using 5 years ago. The technology's changed a lot. Microsoft's in a new version of operating systems. We need to be teaching people things that are relevant in their lives. People want to be protected. They want to listen to you. But if it's boring, if it's the same old, they're not going to pay attention. So absolutely need to be, communicating. And that's a big part of the role of the CISO. I often say to new CISOs, it's one of the easiest things you can do. It's hard. I'm not saying it's to get it right, but it's, first 100 days is to make an impact, is to really improve your security awareness training. Easiest meaning that it's easy to get going. It's not super expensive. Usually it's not millions and millions of dollars, at least out of the gate. But it is so important because there's a lot of truisms in this industry around security awareness training. The human firewall is one of them that's been used, but that front line is so important because it's that person clicking on that link or forwarding that email they shouldn't forward, or doing something with their passwords they shouldn't be doing, that causes the vulnerabilities that leads to these big ransomware attacks. So often it is a phishing attack that leads to a ransomware attack, or somehow the data gets out, sharing a file you shouldn't share, the data wasn't encrypted, some kind of practice that wasn't followed that leads to a big ransomware attack, almost in every case. And so, reused passwords, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I absolutely believe it is the CISO's role to lead that charge In most organizations, it's the CISO's role. I know in some it's in the training department and others, but to really make sure they're communicating to the masses in the enterprise and also to clients and customers as well. That, you know, everybody your company's doing business with, your government's doing business with, needs to be involved in the process.
Everybody involved. Yeah, absolutely. Cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility. And it's great to have leaders like yourself helping to communicate that to the masses, you know, upward, downward, around, all around. The maybe the final note here to kind of leave off on is that you are talking about cybersecurity at a time when cybersecurity might be at its most loudest volume for the masses. We have the war in Ukraine and Russia, state-sponsored attacks. We have, as you called it, way back, 2021 was the year of ransomware. Everybody's thinking about this now. There's even TV shows, Mr. Robot. This is at a time where cybersecurity is, well, would you agree with that? Are you noticing that cybersecurity has reached a new level in the international consciousness now? Absolutely. No question about it. It affects every other domain, war, obviously, like you mentioned, it's involved. It's like medicine. It's become very, very specialized, and there's so many different aspects to it. We talk about cybersecurity as a whole, almost like football as a whole, but then you can break it down into, just like you can in sports, offense and defense. You can break it down into different teams. You can break it down into, scouting reports and intelligence and so many different aspects of our game, of football. But same thing is true of cybersecurity. There's so many different aspects to it that it is, absolutely agree, getting much more attention. Yeah. So now it could be that it seems to me that the CISO is becoming more and more of a high profile member of the C-suite. You've been doing this for a long time. Have you been seeing that also, that the CISO is getting a little bit more of a profile within the organization? I literally just came off a call. I won't go to the details, but we're getting ready for a board presentation, and the CISO is presenting to the audit board and then to the full board. And yes, I'm seeing that more and more and more in most organizations. I do still see, I was fortunate when I was CISO in Michigan. I got regular meetings with the governor, at least quarterly, if not more. I still do see some CISOs that aren't meeting with top, leaders in government. Many are. I do think, you always have your leaders, followers, and laggards. So there may be people watching this, organizations out there where you don't feel like you have that level of attention and you need some help in that. And maybe we can do another session just on how do you get that help? How do you get that support? Maybe at the end of the season, if I'm like last place, how do you turn the team around for next year? But there are certainly organizations that are struggling to get that attention, but I think in most cases they are getting that attention. Yeah, that'd be a great topic. And hopefully, and we'll be doing some more panel discussions too, we can have multiple people from the league or from outside talking about some of these topics too. So I'd be happy to have that conversation with you. That'd be great. All right. Well, Dan Lohrmann, author of Cyber Mayday, valued member of the CISO Phish Bowl Fantasy Football League. It's been a pleasure talking to you as always. Look forward to staying in touch with you. And I hope you have a great day and a great week. Thanks, Elliot. Thank you for your leadership and what you're doing here. I think it's awesome. And good luck with your team this week. Thanks. Thanks. I appreciate it. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.